The sound of rubber-soled shoes echoes through the hospital hallway. Cold fluorescent light spills down onto the pristine white walls, casting a reflection of Emma Carter, a dedicated and seasoned nurse. Her neatly pressed uniform hugs her slender frame, her long brown hair tied back tightly. But today, the calm expression she usually wears is tinged with a flicker of unease. A long shift still isn't over, but a strange feeling rises in her chest as the phone in her pocket buzzes. With a practiced motion, Emma pulls it out and glances at the screen. It's a text from her father, Richard Carter, a man in his 60s, always steady and composed, but rarely one to send a message with such an urgent tone. Richard Carter. We need a family meeting. Emily will be there too. Emma's eyes freeze on that last word. Emily. Her chest tightens, as if an invisible hand has just gripped her heart. It's been 3 years since she last heard that name, a name tied to pain, betrayal, and a past she's fought hard to bury. She stands still in the hallway for a moment, her breathing growing heavy. Outside the window, autumn has painted Toronto streets golden, maple leaves twirling gently in the breeze, drifting down onto the misty pavement. 3 years ago, Emma Carter was a happy woman, or at least she thought she was. Back then, she had what seemed like a perfect marriage with Daniel Turner, a promising cardiologist admired by colleagues and patients alike. They lived in a small but cozy downtown Toronto apartment, sharing quiet dinners and dreaming up plans for the future. But everything shattered when Emily showed up. Emily Carter, Emma's older sister, beautiful, charismatic, and fiercely ambitious. She worked in high-end real estate, always decked out in designer dresses with a razor-sharp gaze. While Emma spent her days in the hospital, tending to patients with her gentle hands, Emily was busy posting photos from lavish parties, flaunting her powerful connections. Emma never imagined her own sister could steal the man she loved most. But one cold, rainy night, after a late shift at the hospital, she saw it with her own eyes. Under the hazy glow of a street lamp, parked along the curb in a sleek luxury car, Emily and Daniel were wrapped up in each other. Emma stood frozen. She hoped she'd seen it wrong, that there was some explanation, but there wasn't. When the car door swung open, Emily flashed a defiant smirk, while Daniel just crossed his arms, his tone dripping with indifference. Emily, with a faint laugh. "Oh, little sister! You finally figured it out, huh?" Daniel, coldly. "Face it, Emma. We're getting a divorce." His words stabbed through her heart like a knife. After that shock, Emma left the apartment, cut off all contact with both of them, and poured herself into her work. But even 3 years later, that wound never fully healed. The hospital buzzes on as usual, but Emma no longer feels the rhythm of life around her. She stares at her father's text, a flood of questions crashing through her mind. Why now? What's Emily coming back for? Why does Dad want a family meeting after all these years? A creeping unease slips into her thoughts. Her father isn't one to forgive easily. He's always been serious, deliberate, with a clear reason for every choice he makes. If he's calling a family meeting, something big is brewing. Emma bites her lip and glances at the clock. Her shift has an hour left, but her mind is already drifting to the old house full of memories and pain she'd rather not face. Outside, the sky darkens, golden streetlights reflecting off the rain-slicked sidewalks, illuminating a quiet, brooding Toronto. Emma sighs and slips the phone back into her pocket. No matter how scared she feels, she knows she can't keep running forever. Tomorrow, she'll have to face Emily. And maybe the truth her father's holding on to. Inside a swanky restaurant in downtown Toronto, Emily Carter lifts a glass of red wine, her signature charming smile lighting up her perfectly made-up face. Tiny diamonds glitter on her pricey earrings, the chandelier's glow bouncing off the designer dress, clinging to her slim figure. Emily's social media is flooded with shots like this: extravagant dinners, luxury getaways, high-fashion hauls. Beside her, Daniel Turner, a talented and ambitious cardiologist, leans back in his chair, exuding a casual confidence. His sharp eyes scan the room, as if sizing up the worth of everyone in it. In his tailored suit, Daniel carries the air of a man who's hit the peak of his career, or at least, that's what he wants people to think. Emily, with a mock sigh, teasing, "Still haven't made up your mind? A guy like you, tied down by a boring marriage like that?" Daniel, smirking, voice cool, "Emma's a good person, but she doesn't fit my world." Emily, with a scoff, twirling her wineglass, "Doesn't fit? You're right about that. Look at her, always stuck with patients, wearing those plain uniforms. No clue about style or how to live a little." Daniel stays quiet. His eyes flicker with a hint of reflection. 3 years ago, he loved Emma, a pure, warm kind of love. But as his career skyrocketed, so did his expectations. Emma stopped being the perfect woman in his eyes. Daniel, sighing, muttering, "She doesn't match my lifestyle." Emily laughs, pleased. She knows she's won. Meanwhile, Emma Carter is still giving her all at the hospital. Long shifts, sleepless nights, racing to save patients. That's her world. She doesn't care about social media, has no time for the latest fashion trends or glitzy parties. She used to think none of that mattered, that her love with Daniel could conquer anything. She remembers mornings sipping coffee together in their little apartment. She remembers weekends cooking side by side, strolling along Lake Ontario. She remembers his gentle hugs as he whispered, "I always wanted a wife like you." But in those last few months, Daniel changed. He'd come home later, stopped holding her like he used to. Dinners together grew rare, replaced by curt texts. "I'm busy." Then the criticism started. Daniel, coldly eyeing the plate in front of him. "Can't we eat at fancy restaurants like Emily does?" Daniel, irritated. "As a nurse, you'll never keep up with my social circle." Daniel, with a dry laugh, his gaze cutting. "Emily's got better taste than you." His words sliced into her like a blade. Emma tried her hardest to save their marriage, but it was clear Daniel had stopped trying. That night, Toronto was cloaked in cold rain. Emma finished a late shift, stepping out of the hospital, exhausted. She pulled her coat tight, bracing against the biting wind. All she wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and hope Daniel was waiting like he used to be. But then she saw it, a scene that broke everything apart. Under a flickering street lamp, a luxury car sat parked at the curb. Inside, two familiar figures were tangled together. Daniel, Emily. The world stopped. Emma's heart pounded, but her feet felt glued to the ground. The car door opened. Emily stepped out, her blonde hair radiant, her smirk bold and challenging. Emily, laughing, arms crossed. "Oh, little sister, you finally caught on, huh?" Daniel, voice flat, no remorse. "Face it, Emma, we're getting a divorce." Thunder rumbled over Toronto's sky. Rain poured down in sheets, but it couldn't calm the storm raging inside Emma. "Emma," voice breaking, almost a whisper. "Why?" Daniel didn't answer. Emily just shrugged, her eyes gleaming with delight at her sister's pain. "Emily," softly but cruel, "because you were never good enough for him." The next day, Emma quietly left their apartment, taking only a small suitcase. She didn't cry in front of Daniel, didn't beg him to come back. She just stayed silent, knowing their marriage had been dead for a long time. Toronto's sky hung gray as she walked down the rain-soaked street. She'd lost the man she loved. She'd lost faith in her family. But the deepest cut was that the one who'd stabbed her in the back was her own sister. As the door closed behind her, Emma knew it was the end of her past, and the start of a future she hadn't pictured. Faint sunlight spilled over Toronto, glinting off the city's cold glass towers. Emma Carter stepped into the hospital, feeling like she was moving through a different world, a world where everything felt empty, where her heart had gone numb. Since that painful divorce, she threw herself into work, night shifts, grueling overtime, racing to save lives. She filled the void left by Daniel and Emily's betrayal. The hospital's brightly lit halls, the patients who needed her, they kept her too busy to think. Emma, to herself, eyes hollow. "As long as I keep working, as long as I don't stop, I won't have to think about it." But no matter how far she ran, the past always caught up. Every time she picked up her phone, she'd see Daniel and Emily's lives splashed across social media. They were living it up, windswept beaches in Europe, champagne-soaked parties under twinkling lights. In those photos, Emily beamed, flashing a dazzling ring Daniel once promised was for the one I love most. So, the one he loved most was never her. Emma locked her phone, her hands trembling slightly. Why was Emily so ruthless? Why would her own sister strip everything away without a shred of guilt? But even in her deepest pain, she didn't have time to cry. Right now, someone needed her more than anyone, her mother. Margaret Carter, once a strong and loving woman, was now a faint shadow of herself. Rheumatoid arthritis had tormented her for years, and now it had worsened to the point where she couldn't care for herself. Pain made her hands shake, each step a struggle. And, predictably, Emily was nowhere to be found. Emma, on the phone, voice thick with frustration. Can you at least call Mom to check on her? Emily, with a dry laugh, dismissive. Emma, you know I'm busy. Don't make a big deal out of it. Emma, gripping the phone, voice catching. You're off in Paris. Meanwhile, Mom's in pain every single day. Emily, sighing, bored. Mom's got you to take care of her, right? You're always the good kid. The call ended. Emily didn't call back. Anger flared in Emma's chest, but she didn't have time to dwell on it. She had to handle everything alone. Every day, after leaving the hospital, she'd come home to care for her mom. She'd change bandages, massage aching joints, cook soft meals her mother could manage. Each night, she'd sit by the bed, listening to her mother's faint breathing, wondering if she'd make it through another day. Mom, gazing at her daughter, eyes full of love. Emma, you don't have to do it all alone. Emma, smiling, voice tight. I want to, Mom. Because aside from her mom, she had no one left. One winter evening, snow blanketed the world outside the window. Emma leaned down to tuck the blanket around her mother, but as she touched her, something felt wrong. Her mother's hand was cold. Emma, panicked, shaking her gently. Mom, can you hear me? Margaret Carter's eyes fluttered open, a weak smile crossing her lips. Mom, whispering, I'm sorry, my girl. Then her eyes closed for good. Emma sat in the silent room, her heart in pieces. Toronto's sky was gray the day they said goodbye to her mother. Only a small group of relatives and friends showed up for the funeral. Emma stood by the casket, her eyes dry. She'd cried herself out the night before. Emily didn't come. No call, no text, not even a word of condolence. Relative, whispering to another. Unbelievable. Emily didn't even show up. Colleague, looking at Emma, sighing. She doesn't deserve to call herself a daughter. Emma said nothing. She didn't feel pain anymore, just emptiness. After the funeral, she returned to the old house where she'd grown up. She wandered through it, touching old photo frames, the furniture her mom loved. The house brimmed with memories, but it was too heavy with sorrow. Emma knew she couldn't stay. She sold the house and moved to a small apartment near the hospital, not to forget her mom, but because she needed to keep living. Emma, standing in her new place, staring at Toronto's night sky, whispering, Mom, I'll be stronger. For the first time in years, she felt like she was turning a new page. But then, a text popped up on her phone out of nowhere. Richard Carter, we need a family meeting. Emily will be there too? Emma stared at the screen, her heart clenching. She knew the real battle wasn't over yet. Emma had lost everything: love, family, her beloved mother. But now, Emily was back, and her father wanted a family meeting. Was this a chance for justice, or just another storm waiting to hit? Stick around for the next part, when the real secret behind this family meeting comes to light. Emma Carter stands before the heavy wooden door of the old Victorian house, the home where she grew up, a place holding both beautiful memories and pain she'd rather forget. Outside, snow falls silently, blanketing the porch in white, but inside her, a storm is brewing. It's been a year since her mother passed, a year since she left this house to start over. But today, she's back, because her father, Richard Carter, has called a family meeting. She clenches her fists, takes a deep breath, and knocks. The door swings open, not by a housekeeper, but by Richard himself. He stands there, thinner than before, but his eyes still sharp as ever. Dressed in a neat suit, his face carries a hardness beyond his usual sternness, like he's gearing up for a fight. Richard, calmly, "You're here." "Come in." Emma steps inside, a strange sense of unfamiliarity washing over her in this once familiar space. Everything's the same: the brown leather sofa, the warm fireplace, family photos lined up on the wall. But something's different. On the living room table, stacks of files sit neatly arranged. Her father's computer screen glows, displaying a slew of documents and important emails. Emma's heart tightens. Something's off. The door bursts open again. Emily strides in first. Still glamorous, still haughty, but there's a shift in her step, not the unshakable confidence Emma once knew, but a cautious edge. Behind her, Daniel, the man who was once her husband. He's in an expensive suit, but his face betrays tension. Emily tilts her head, a fake smile curling her lips. "Emily," sweetly but cutting. "Emma, you still look as simple as ever." Emma doesn't reply. She meets her sister's gaze head-on, unflinching. She's not the fragile woman she was 3 years ago. Daniel crosses his arms, his eyes flicking to the files on the table, before he smirks faintly. Daniel, superior, almost bored. "We should talk about the family estate." A deadly silence blankets the room. Richard Carter stands. Richard, calm but firm. "Before we get to the estate, I've got some big news." He pauses, like he's bracing to land a knockout punch. Richard, voice low. "I've got terminal pancreatic cancer." The silence explodes. Emily and Daniel freeze. Emily's eyes widen for a split second before she pulls herself together or tries to. Emily, swallowing hard, feigning emotion. "Dad, are you sure?" Richard, with a dry laugh. "Check your texts, Emily. I sent the medical report from the hospital." Daniel's hand tightens slightly, clearly calculating something. Daniel, thoughtful, weighing an angle. "We could look into cutting-edge treatments. I can reach out to some top doctors." Richard, shaking his head. "No need. I've got my own plan." Emma feels a lump in her throat, but stays silent. She knows her dad isn't the type to be swayed. If he's saying this, he's made peace with it. Emily forces a smile and glances at the files on the table. Emily, softly, but her eyes sharp as knives. "So, have you thought about dividing up the estate?" Emma stares at her sister, disgust rising in her chest. Emma, with a faint, cold smile. "You don't waste any time, do you, Emily?" Emily, shrugging, shameless. "Just being practical, little sister. We all have to be." Richard chuckles softly, but it's not a warm sound. Richard, resting his hand on the files, voice steady and commanding. "You're right, and that's why today, I'm laying it all out." He opens the first file. Evidence starts spilling onto the table. Evidence of what? Emma isn't sure, but she knows a real storm is coming. The air in the living room feels frozen. The fireplace crackles, but it can't cut through the icy chill of the secrets about to unravel. Richard Carter stands tall, hand on a thick stack of files, his piercing gaze sweeping over Emily and Daniel. Richard, hard, emotionless. "I've spent 3 years gathering this." And today, the truth comes out. Emma sits beside her dad, her heart pounding. She'd sensed something was wrong from the start, but she never guessed he'd been quietly digging for 3 years. Emily crosses her legs, leaning back, trying to look relaxed, but her fingers dig into the edge of her designer dress, a telltale sign she's rattled. Daniel, usually so self-assured, looks edgy now. Sweat beads on his forehead, though he keeps up the calm facade. Richard flips open the first file and slides it to the center of the table. Inside, a stack of bank statements. Richard, calm but weighty. This is proof of the money I sent every month to care for your mom. Emma leans in to read, but her eyes quickly fill with horror. Emma, whispering, voice trembling. Oh my God, this money! Every month, Richard sent $5,000 to Emily for hospital bills, meds, and their mom's care. But the statements show most of it never made it to the hospital. Instead, it went to high-end fashion boutiques, Michelin-starred restaurants, and even lavish European trips. Emily stiffens, but keeps up her fake smile. Emily, with a weak laugh, arms crossed. Dad, you seriously believe these numbers? It's just a misunderstanding. Richard doesn't respond. He opens the second file, an email printout from Emily to her financial manager. Email from Emily. Transfer $3,000 to my personal account. I'll deal with the hospital later. Emily's face goes pale. Emily, stammering, voice shaky. I can explain. Dad, it's not what it looks like. Richard, cutting her off, voice sharp. Really? What about these fancy parties then? He opens a folder of screenshots from social media, Emily bragging about gourmet dinners with pricey wine, shopping sprees with designer bags, all while their mom lay in the hospital, suffering from inadequate care. Emma bites her lip, fury boiling inside her. Emma, voice trembling with anger. Mom called you, begged you to visit, and you were in Paris? Emily can't answer. Richard calmly opens the next file and slides it toward Daniel. Richard, stern, no mercy. And here are the medical reports you tampered with. Daniel freezes, real fear flashing in his eyes. Hospital records show Daniel deliberately downplayed their mom's condition, making it seem less severe so the hospital wouldn't prioritize urgent care. Richard, voice cutting. You wrote in the reports that her illness wasn't critical. It cut hospital costs, but it also meant she didn't get proper treatment. They've both lost everything. Emma watches quietly, a sense of peace blooming in her chest. 3 years ago, she was the one betrayed, left with nothing. Now, the truth shines bright, and justice has found its mark. She looks at her dad, her heart swelling with respect. He's not just her father. He's the one who brought justice for her mom, for their family. Richard, softly, proud. Your mom can rest easy now. Emma nods, tears rolling down her cheeks. But this time, they're not from pain, they're from release. Emily and Daniel stand wordlessly and shuffle out, their figures shrinking under Toronto's cold streetlights. For the first time in 3 years, Emma feels like she's truly won. Justice has been served. The betrayers are exposed. But Emma still has a long road ahead to rediscover herself and rebuild her life. Toronto. 1 year later, morning sunlight dances on lush green leaves, casting shimmering patterns along the gravel path winding through the backyard garden. The scent of blooming roses mingles with a cool breeze, bringing a gentle calm Emma Carter hasn't felt in years. She stands in the garden, cradling a red rose, her thoughtful eyes gazing into the distance. Everything's changed. She's changed. A year ago, Emma was still the woman reeling from betrayal, abandonment, and heartbreak. But now, she's someone new, stronger, steadier, and more at peace than ever. At Toronto General Hospital, a text pings her phone. HR system. Congrats, Emma Carter. You've officially been named head nurse of the cardiology ward. Thanks for your incredible contributions. Emma smiles faintly, but she's not surprised. She's worked hard, poured every ounce of herself into proving her worth. Emma, to herself, eyes firm. I'm not that weak girl anymore. She's turned her past pain into fuel, not just to become a better nurse, but to help the patients who need her most. The hospital used to be her escape from reality. Now, it's where she's found her purpose, and that makes her genuinely happy. While Emma rebuilds her life, Emily and Daniel spiral down the opposite path, a path of collapse. After that fateful family meeting, their world fell apart. Emily's designer dresses, lavish parties, and luxury trips are gone. She lost her job, her high society connections, and the people who once flattered her turned their backs. Emily's old friend, with a dry laugh, whispering, "She's broke now, nobody cares anymore." That line became Emily's sentence, a punishment for someone who once valued money and power above all. Daniel's no better off. The scandal over falsified medical records tanked his reputation in the medical field. The hospital fired him, and no major facility would touch a doctor with a fraud record. Daniel's old boss, coldly, "You threw away the honor of this profession. You don't deserve that white coat." His career crumbled, his finances dried up, and then, their relationship fractured. One night, in a cramped apartment stripped of its former luxury, their voices clash in a bitter fight. Emily, screaming, eyes desperate. "This is all your fault. You cost us everything." Daniel, snarling, furious. "And you! You're the one who shoved me off the cliff." And, as if it was inevitable, they split. The two who teamed up to betray Emma now face their reckoning. Back in the present, Emma sits on a wooden bench in her dad's garden. Her hand brushes the red roses, her mom's favorite. She remembers afternoons sitting here with her mom, her gentle smile as she shared dreams from her youth, her belief that good people always get their due. Now Emma gets it more than ever. Every hurt, every scar, it's all behind her. She doesn't hate Emily or Daniel anymore. They don't matter. They've lost their power over her life. Emma, whispering, eyes glowing with peace. "Mom, Dad, I'm stronger now." A breeze sweeps through the garden, carrying the scent of flowers, memories, and a fresh start. Emma, smiling, gazing at the clear blue sky. "I'll live happily. It's the best way to honor you both." For the first time in years, Emma's heart feels completely at ease. The past is closed, and her new life is just beginning. Justice has been served. The betrayers have paid their price. Emma's risen above it all and found peace. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about healing, strength, and the belief that justice always wins out. And the biggest lesson, sometimes the best way to win is to let go and live a better life. Thanks for following this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe for more tales to come.